Live from WXOU at Oakland University, it's the GioMoShow. Now, give it up for your host, Giovanni Mosheri.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the GioMoShow interviews, or GioMoShow special, if you will, because we have a special guest here, former sports director here at WXOU, my mentor, the guy who got me into this in the first place, Ben Schroeder, here on the GioMoShow, here with myself, Giovanni Mosheri. How you doing, Ben?
It's great to be on the show. It's great to listen to the show, and it's great to have played any sort of role in this.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time, but we're back where it all started.
That's right,
and we're doing it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having here. So I wanted to have you here for not only to get to know you and what we've done here at WXOU Sports, but I don't know a whole lot about hockey. I need you to guide me through this past season in the NHL with the Red Wings, and also we'll talk shop, of course, about the Stanley Cup Finals, Florida Panthers bringing it back to Florida. We'll chit-chat about that, but you got to teach me about hockey. You got to reel me in a little bit, kind of give me the scoop as to what's going on. So we'll cover all that here on the GioMoShow.
A lot of people say that this was the best season of the NHL from an entertainment standpoint.
I have been hearing that
in a long time, maybe ever. And the Stanley Cup Finals was certainly one of the best finals that I've ever watched. So
yeah, it was a lot of fun to keep up with it, but we'll take it back to me and you here. We'll take it back to you here at WXOU. Like I mentioned, he was one of our old sports directors here, and he, it was kind of a new era for WXOU Sports after the pandemic. You were the sports director at the time, and after COVID, there was nothing. There was nothing but dust and tumbleweeds going across here on campus, and you took the initiative to restart live sports here at WXOU with a tagline on every whiteboard. I put it on posters throughout the dorms. Live sports are back on WXOU. So let's how did that start? What made you want to do that, man?
First of all, taglines. I must say that I've always been a sucker for taglines.
A good one will always get me.
And I always say, broadcast and media, any kind of production, that's like my main thing. Mm-hmm. But my minor in college was advertising. So I was always very good at coming up with things for advertising and ideas. Artistic-wise, not so much. I can't make it, but I can make the concepts. Luckily, especially my girlfriend is so good at graphic design, so she'd make all of these great content, this good content for me based on my ideas. And sometimes my ideas would be pretty bad drawings. And I'm like, hey, do you know what
sticky notes and napkins, right?
Yeah, stick figures, doing stuff like this. And I'm like, do you understand what I mean from this? And she did wonderful work for all the content that we created for WXOU, and then all my own brand stuff. And it was awesome. So
yeah, and she later became our graphic designer for this last year, and has done a phenomenal job. Absolutely,
great work. I mean, she's got the stuff as far as the art goes. I mean, especially graphic design. It's crazy what she can do. But my little noodle is very engaged on creating good content. I just don't, I can't put the pen to the paper to do it. I just have the ideas that lead to it. So I will say, when we were coming back from the pandemic and we needed to say, hey, we're covering live sports again, which was also really difficult to get to that point where we could have live sports. But I think that it was huge to try and get people interested on campus, because that's already an uphill battle.
All right, especially at a commuter school like Oakland University, 70% come and go.
But I think we did a great job, and I will say too that live sports on WXOU weren't really even there before the pandemic. I'll say that. Yeah,
because our little window is the pre-pandemic days. I came in fall of 2020, so you're kind of my window to the past here.
So when I started here at OU, one of the big grabs for me for OU was the radio station. I saw that they had a really good history. Mm-hmm. I didn't know just how old that history was, though.
Yeah.
So when
57 years and counting.
Yeah, and when you get into the station, you can tell, first of all.
Yes.
And it's fun. It's a great culture to be around, like, the people. but you could tell there's a lot. It's very old, and it needs some tender love and care.
Yes.
So when I had stepped in 2018, and came to the radio station, they didn't really cover live sports. I don't believe they did at all in 2018 and 19. And then when the pandemic hit is when I had starting to work hard towards the goal of covering Oakland's athletics. And I pretty much had the entire stay-at-home period to think about what I wanted to do and how I could do it. And I kind of changed up on the entire direction of not just what I wanted to do here, but in life in general. So
yeah,
I was able to come back, 2021 or really 2020 area. I started getting to work and trying to bring us back into the modern age of radio.
Yeah.
Where we just had these kind of closet shows where you didn't really know what was going on most of the time. So,
yeah, like you as an audience tuning in, it could be anything.
Yeah, you kind of just felt like there was just the random hallway in Oakland University that was always playing elevator music.
Right.
It really didn't have a solid culture, and I've always believed step one of successful radio and television is having good sports on it. And if we could get our sports right, then we could kind of branch it off, and maybe if people took it seriously and said, look, there's a really good sports there, they'd be willing to, bring in maybe good finance, shows, maybe good culture shows, good anything.
Yeah,
so
the sports kind of give the station some
juice.
legitimacy.
Right. Just give it a little push over the edge. And look, I think we did our job, while I was here. I graduated in the winter of 22, and it was awesome. I mean, we probably had a good, before I graduated, about a year and a half, maybe even 2 years, or more like a year and a half. So 2021, we put these wheels in motion where, lots of meetings, lots of everything with the athletic department at OU, learning the NCAA rules to make sure that we're not
infringing on anything.
Yeah, doing anything wrong. And luckily, there was a lot of people at Oakland who embraced what we were doing and helped us along. But it was an uphill battle between, losing FM signal and not being able to I mean, a lot of the training we did before the regular season where we really started doing live sports was on the Comrex system. Comrex, most people know, is just a system gives you a remote connection to the radio station from wherever you are. Very easy to use.
Yeah, basically, it's what you plug your headphones into when you're on the sideline of a game. It makes it very easy.
Absolutely.
It's supposed to.
And all the training we did, all the testing we did, completely useless once the 2021-2022 season started. So we started that year, and we had to use a tool called BUTT. The tool is called BUTT, BUTT.
And what does it stand for?
Broadcast using this tool, right?
It's a real thing, folks.
So a bunch of hoops to jump through to get a remote connection into our second computer in the studio, and then broadcast from there. And
so it's basically toothpicks and spit to put this thing together.
It's what the cavemen used back before there was fire and there was radio.
Yeah.
So
that's such that we had to Band-Aid fix a whole lot of this setup. Yeah.
And we were able to do it, and I'd love to take credit for all of it, but I mean, we had a great general manager, Logan, obviously you, Harjan, everyone who came along, Sam Smith at the beginning, everyone that we had a bunch of great people who helped the process, helped the wheels get turning. So I won't take credit for all of it.
Sure.
But I will say that we got it off the ground. We did things in our first year that were astronomical. I mean, going to MSU.
Yeah, that was a big trip.
Broadcasting a NCAA Division I game from the Brez is pretty big league. I mean,
that was big time. Yeah,
you feel pretty good about it, even though we were we were in the attic of the we were under the steps in a really really weird closed off little for our first year doing it. But you know what, just to be at the Breslin Center doing it was surreal, and just you don't trade that for the world.
For sure.
Traveling to cover a Division I basketball team.
Yeah, as a small college radio station.
Yeah. So I feel like we made huge strides, and I mean, there's still, no ceiling. So I mean, hopefully, we can keep it up. I know we're both graduated now. Our
we're old dudes now.
We're old, but I hope that we can help, be those hands that guide this station, because it really is something special and something that I think we're both invested in, largely. And I'd love to see it get more serious. I'd love to see the radio station have some major improvements, down the line, and I'd love to help out every step of the way.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's been a whole lot of fun. After kind of being handed it off, it was me and Harj kind of taking it through.
Right.
We've built it. We've got new broadcasters in, and all started from you, my friend. So I give you a whole lot of credit for all that.
Yeah. You guys just knocked it out of the park. I mean, I like to say in a way that I kind of, to put the the cart on the rails.
Sure.
But you guys are the ones who made it go. I mean, I pushed as hard as I could to get the headway that we needed, the little dent we could get, and you guys just punched it all the way through. So it's great. I mean, looking back and seeing what you, and I still do some broadcasts there and there.
Of course,
I got to do a basketball game this past year, and be a part of the historic season that OU's basketball team had. But you guys knocked it out of the park. You did a great job, and obviously it goes without saying that I'm very proud of the work that you and Harsh did.
Oh, we appreciate that. But enough of the compliments now. We got to talk some hockey here. Want to kind of shift gears here. I mean, we'll start with the NHL kind of as a whole. You mentioned the greatest season that we've ever seen, capped off by a Stanley Cup Finals. That was also one of the greatest, narrative-wise, entertainment-wise, that we've seen in a long time. But I don't know a whole lot about hockey. So from what I missed and from what you've seen, kind of what were some of the highlights from this season? Why was this the best season ever?
Well, I could pretty much tell you anything, since you don't know about hockey. I could
talk to me like I'm 5.
But I will say there's a lot of things. The Atlantic Division has kind of run things for a while. They won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
But the East in general has always been very good. The East side, East Division of the NHL has always been probably the best. You look at it, you have had a couple of Western Conference teams win the Stanley Cup over the last couple of years, but it's a slugfest in the East. I think what made this season so good was the collapse of the Metropolitan Division. So you had teams like the Penguins, the Capitals. The Flyers were a surprise. The Flyers were actually on the good side of things. But
sure.
The Penguins, the Capitals, the Devils, these teams took major steps back. And when teams that, you're right penciling into the playoffs, Sidney Crosby's on the Penguins, you're penciling him into the playoffs, Alex Ovechkin's on the Capitals, penciling him into the playoffs, you just kind of figure that they can write it home.
Right.
Those teams took major steps back. And if teams take step backs, that means there's room in the playoffs for others. So
some come forward.
The regular season became just an absolute brawl in the East. The Red Wings were up there. They were a young up-and-coming team for a while. The Senators seemed like they might be a problem. The Flyers really seemed like they'd be a problem. The Flyers, the Caps, and the Red Wings were all fighting for that last spot, if you'll remember, at the end of the year.
Yeah, I remember that. I recall hearing on the radio all the time that final wild card spot.
And it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking for the Red Wings. They ended up not being able to get it done on the last day of the season because of an empty net goal scored against them on the Flyers, because the Flyers pulled their goalie thinking they needed to win, essentially.
Yeah.
And they didn't, and it wouldn't have mattered. It turned out not to matter. So they didn't know that the Red Wings had already won their game in overtime, so they were eliminated.
Right. Because the games are going on simultaneously.
So they pulled the Wings down with them. They pulled the Wings down with them. So I will say that as a Wings fan, I mean, it was great to have optimism. I mean, there were some dark parts of the season.
For sure.
When Larkin went down with injury, they sucked. I mean, they sucked. And you hate to put so much emphasis on one player, but it makes it clear that Larkin is the best player on the team. It's not even close.
No doubt.
So I think the entire year, The Oilers sucked at first. The Oilers were horrible, and they made it to the Cup final, and so it was a slugfest. It really was entertaining, and I think it goes back to the fact that, if you haven't watched hockey like your entire life, when I was younger and falling in love with the sport, was the beating and banging, like you build a Stanley Cup team with grit, with you're going to punch your team into submission, and
sometimes literally.
Yes, and that was what I grew up on for hockey. And in 2012, 2013, you kind of started to see a shift where it was, we just need players that are fast. Maybe they can't even shoot the puck, but if they could skate 40 miles per hour, put them on a team.
If they could get the space that they need.
So we saw this huge migration of play where I think the sport entered officially the modern era of hockey.
Sure.
Where it's speed-based. I mean, if you don't have a fast team, then you're not going to do anything.
They're going to skate circles around you.
And that's what makes this sport, I mean, to people who aren't hockey fans, the number one thing they say is they just love the speed of it, the intensity of it. When
you're constantly clenched in a way. You're always on edge.
100%. So if you go to, watching it on TV is one thing, which I think hockey is the best sport to watch on TV.
I've always told that.
But then when you actually go there too, it takes it to a whole nother level. There's sports where, like baseball, that watching it on TV, you're probably going to fall asleep.
Right. But sometimes that's what people like about it.
Right. That's they put it on to fall asleep. And that's not trashing baseball, which,
it's just
honesty.
You can't defend it. The sport has minimal action.
The only thing worse than watching baseball on television is watching bad baseball on television.
Yes.
And what has the city of Detroit been doing for the last 10 years?
Bad baseball.
It's awful. When I was growing up, I used to love, like 2013, I was like, man, I love watching the Tigers. Since then, it's like, why would I watch this? Why would I spend 4 hours of my day watching this? So,
especially with the length of the game.
So absolutely not. And then basketball is one of those sports. The NBA, it's kind of both ways. I don't think that watching on TV is really that exciting, just because it's give it to LeBron, let LeBron go.
Yeah, and it's whatever superstar. It's kind of centralized.
Obviously, I don't know a ton about the NBA.
Sure.
NCAA basketball, on the other hand, awesome. I mean, it's intensity. These kids are playing for their futures, essentially.
Yeah.
And they know it. So I think the NCAA basketball, that's legit. And then being there, obviously, we love that too. But hockey, it's way different. I mean, you feel the intensity through the television, and then once you're there, like, your heart's beating out of your chest because of how fast-paced it's going. It's like watching a race, but there's they're trying to score and beat each other to death. So it's an amazing sport. There's nothing like it in the world. I will say, when you're getting into it, a complaint that I have always had is it is so confusing. It is so confusing. I've played
level, sure.
I have played hockey since I was 2 years old. I understand every single rule to the T.
Yeah.
I could become a referee right now.
Yeah, and I see, like, a lot, like, and especially like those who play hockey and follow it, they have, from the entire time from the beginning, they've never known any better. Tougher to see kind of a crossover from one sport to another in that sense. Like, most people have known it forever.
100%. If you're, 22, 23, 24 years old.
That's how old I am.
God forbid older. I mean, in your 40s. And you're trying to learn the sport of hockey. You're looking at it and you're like, why'd they blow the whistle?
Yes.
What happened? Oh, they crossed that blue line before they were allowed. Wait, they crossed the blue line before they were allowed?
But I thought they do that all the time.
It sounds infantile, like, to people who are fans of the sport.
Yeah.
Like, hearing me say that, like, there's no one who actually does that. Believe me, I've had so many conversations of people who don't understand the sport, who are watching it, and a team ices the puck, and they go, what happened? Why did everyone stop? I'm like, oh, they iced it. What does that mean? They threw the puck down the ice before the red line, without it touching the other team, and you're not allowed to do it. So it comes back, they're like, oh, okay, kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah, it's a way to kind of stop delays in game, or kind of from stalling.
Right. But then the next play, they do the same thing, and they're expecting the icing to be called, and a player on the other team beats them to it.
Yeah.
So there's no icing. They're like, wait, why didn't the icing call? So the rules are kind of complex if you take a step back, from knowing it your entire life. I've known it my entire life, so I understand it.
Sure.
Offsides, tagging up on offsides. I understand that. I know every single word there is in the hockey vocabulary, including Doc Emmerich's, extended vocabulary from his days at NBC. So I think that it's a really difficult sport to get into, to follow religiously, and really become a diehard fan of. But being a casual fan of hockey, it's easier than any other sport, because you might not understand what the heck's going on, but you're looking at it, I like it. I don't know what these funny guys are doing, but I like it.
At the very least, you know what they're trying to do is
Absolutely.
to scoring the goal.
Absolutely. And then the energy of the people around me. So me personally, I'm not an energy person. I don't like concerts, for example.
Sure.
Right? I think the best way to experience music is with my headphones, listening on Spotify to a produced version of the song that sounds awesome.
Right.
Sometimes bands can suck in person, or a bunch of different things.
But you want to soak it all in.
Right. People want to. I hate that. I'm not an experienced person. My girlfriend is. Loves going to concerts. So I go to. We compromise by going to every single concert that ever comes to Detroit.
Yeah, very fair compromise.
And she says she's an experienced girl, so she likes, being around the energy of it, and
Sure.
I can understand that, because hockey, like if you're at Little Caesars Arena, Red Wings are down by 1 goal, dying minutes of the game. They got the other team hemmed in the zone. You feel everyone tensing up, and the puck finally goes in and everyone jumps up.
Yeah.
Even if you're not a fan of the Red Wings, you're jumping out of your seat and you're screaming. You're probably like at the end of the game, like 5 beers in at that point. So, I mean, you probably could jump up anyway.
On a good night.
But it's such a great sport. And I've always wanted to grow the sport of hockey. I think that we're so lucky to be in Detroit, hockey town.
Yeah.
Where it's literally life. I mean, everyone loves hockey, and everyone needs a good Red Wings team. And we're turning that corner, I think, now. So I think this year as a whole, a very broad and simple explanation. Players are the fastest they've ever been. You're not even seeing, a lot of people hate that the fights are being taken out.
Yeah,
fights
and
are phased out. I mean, you're not seeing enforcers on teams. There's teams that have stars like McDavid, even, where they don't really need an enforcer. You want a big guy who's really good, who can, encourage people to stay away from your stars, but you don't necessarily need someone whose sole job on the team is punching someone. Because that just takes up a spot on your team for someone who could be a speed demon scoring goals.
Right.
So, I think in hockey, there's, typically 2 options you have for a third line, third line scoring and a third line checking, right? So that third line checking used to be like big, bulky, like they're going to bash your head in.
Yeah, they got freaking Yetis going around on the ice.
And most teams, I don't want to say most teams, because there's still a decent balance of third line scoring. Third line scoring is exactly what it sounds like. In 2016, I believe, there was the Pittsburgh Penguins won the Stanley Cup, right?
Yeah.
They had what was called the HBK line, right? That's the perfect example. If you want to look it up, the HBK line is the perfect example of a third line scoring, because that's what they did. I mean, Carl Hagelin was insane. Nick Bonino was great for them, and Phil Kessel, who can forget about Phil Kessel? I mean, the hot dog man himself, lighting the lamp so often in those playoffs. So that was the best example we've had probably in a very long time of a third line scoring in the playoffs anyway.
Sure.
And then third line checking is still important. I'd say that the Red Wings kind of lean closer to that, where it's not about beating people up anymore. It's more about the forecheck. It's very, scoring can be dependent on that, but third line checking is more just wearing down your opposition and getting ready for a quick change, and having someone, the next line step on and be able to capitalize on opportunities, whether that's icing or whatever, but also wearing down a team physically, because that's very important. We saw it in the Stanley Cup Finals with the Oilers wearing down. They didn't win the first 3 games. They fell down 3-0,
yeah,
but they wore down the Panthers the first 3 games. were able to swing it back the other way because they wore them down. So on a smaller scale of that, having a third line checking is pretty much that in a game itself. You send them out there to make their defensemen look over their shoulders when they have. So you dump the puck in and you beeline for their defenseman. And their defenseman needs to move the puck really quick. They're going to make a mistake.
Yeah, you got to force the action.
Absolutely. So obviously that's the definition of dump and chase, where you dump it and then you go get it. And the checking line isn't really there to capitalize on that and score.
Sure.
Where a scoring line is going to forecheck the same way, but they're probably going to finesse it where they're going to curl them up the boards, lift their stick or something, or force a turnover through minimal contact. Third line checking is barreling down on you and trying to not hurt the defenseman, but keep them in their minds. You know, so I think the biggest shift we've seen is less physicality in the NHL. You're not seeing Nick Kronwall come out of nowhere and take someone's head off anymore.
Yeah, the Undertaker is not coming through. It's not Stone Cold coming out in the Zamboni anymore.
It's so quick that it's so violent when you hit now because these players are so quick. Even skating backwards, they're so quick. It's so violent. Things look worse than they ever did. You're probably getting suspended for hits that you saw in the early 2010s even. So it's way different of a sport, way faster, way more finesse of a sport. And I think that's what people, coming into it are really liking, is that it's quick. There's a lot of energy to it. There's never a downtime. The commercial breaks are short, and there's never downtime because it's going back and forth. There's no stopping. There's no the final minute of play lasts 20 minutes because they're shooting free throws. There's no, even penalty shots, right? PKs in soccer is like, oh my God, it's going to take forever. The shootout is fast paced. It sucks though. Shootout in hockey sucks, but I mean, it's fast paced. Everything is action packed. So hockey's in the best place that it ever has been. The Red Wings, though.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about them a bit.
Not so much. Not so much the Red Wings, man.
Yeah, 'cause I remember kind of like, so I guess from my outside perspective when it came to the Red Wings, I knew coming and chasing that wild card spot. You just see my tweets,
so you just think that they're melting down.
Yeah, I kind of know like, oh, they're not doing so hot because Ben's tweeting.
Yeah. You're like, oh, the Red Wings are on. Let's check Twitter, and you see 100 posts from me, and you're like, oh God, they're not winning.
Uh-oh. But I remember like that last part of the season, that wild card chase, somewhere in that, maybe it was a little bit before, but the Red Wings were on a good winning streak, and then they put a patch on their jersey.
Yeah.
What, like, guide me through that. Was that a real curse? Like, do you believe that being a real curse as to why the Red Wings didn't get into the playoffs, or am I overblowing that?
So, look, everyone will tell you in sports that there's superstition. Right?
Sure. I recall hockey being notoriously superstitious, right?
Whether or not that is legitimate or not, like it didn't actually, the patch on their jersey did not actually make them play worse. And it didn't help that it was lined up with when Larkin got injured. Right. So I think he got injured like the game after they added the patch. He played against the Islanders and got injured in that game. I believe is how it happened. But you can't blame the patch on everything. The main issue was the team just didn't have enough talent on the roster, and that's non-negotiable.
Right.
That is just a fact.
You can't get around not having talent.
If your captain goes down for a couple weeks and you disintegrate, you probably have bigger issues than a garbage patch on your jersey. However, what I will say, while I don't think it led to like their performance on the ice being any different, I will say that how dare you,
right?
From an outside perspective, taking an original 6 franchise, right, the most beautiful jersey in the NHL, and your owner puts a garbage company logo on it.
Of all kinds of companies, like that was the most shocking to me. Is like, how did they fork up enough money and just try and pretend to not be garbage? It's garbage.
I'm not going to say that I'm 100% on board with jersey promotion, right?
Sure.
Putting patches in general on the equipment. These teams don't need it. No matter what they say, they don't need it. They have money. These owners are billionaires. And you're telling me that they need to squeeze out, they need to maximize these profits so badly, they're hurting that badly that they need to put advertising on everything like that?
Yeah.
I mean, the National Hockey League has digital ads on boards. They're pretty much the future.
Right.
You do not need these on your equipment. But it's not the hill I'm willing to die on. It's fine if you do it right. Some things, I think the Penguins have a company called something Penguin on their helmets. It fits.
Was it like tuxedo, like Wesner tuxedo or something?
Like that, Mr. Popper's Penguins. It's something that fits. Chicago's has bell tire, and it doesn't look super out of place. It kind of looks stupid because, like, why is there an advertisement on the top league of professional hockey in the world? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But having Illich put a garbage logo on your jersey, from a player's standpoint, I've got to believe that hurts.
Right.
Whether or not they admit it or pay any attention to it, even psychologically, like, your team's doing the best it ever has, and your owner sells you out to a garbage company, and you immediately collapse after. I mean, it's going to be remembered for years. I mean, the bad press I still know people who take pictures of, like, the Priority logo whenever they see it and are like, I hate you.
Yeah.
Like, I know a lot of people say, like, all publicity is good publicity. Not true. In marketing, you learn that is that is nowhere near correct.
That going for your advertising minor.
Right. You don't want people to associate your brand with the worst thing on earth, which is what people do with Priority now. Like, I know people who are like buying a house and they're asking, like, does Priority service this neighborhood? Because if they do, I'm not buying, which sounds delusional.
It could be completely baseless, but that's you got that connection to it.
Right. People are crazy. And no one's seriously going to, determine if they're buying a house based on a garbage company or not.
But they're not going to like it as much.
But they have that in their mind that they hate Priority. And they always will. They're lucky that they're a garbage company because it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you like them. It doesn't matter if you like them or not. They're coming to pick up your garbage on Friday.
It's not a consumer product. You can't really change your mind on it.
You can't vote with your dollar on it and not get it because it's not something you get or not. It's just something that's paid by cities to go pick up garbage.
Yeah.
So, which begs the question: why do they need to advertise?
That too.
But
I didn't even know I didn't even know, like, it existed.
They don't need to be on a hockey team. Like, it's not a good fit. You learn a lot about fit, like, for advertising, right? It's not a good fit because Priority, they're going to want to reach out to consumers, business owners, people who want to put dumpsters outside their, businesses.
Yeah.
Why do you want to put it on a sports team's jersey that fans are going to see? It doesn't make sense to me. I think that they should just, I think they should alter it. I don't know how long the deal is, but I don't think it's been good for either party. But yeah, it still bothers me. I think that more for a fan perspective than anything is, like, seeing those jerseys have, the Priority patch on it. It's kind of depressing.
Yeah, it's like disgracing,
and it takes away from the jersey. Yeah,
it's so historic.
Not a good look for the Red Wings to do that. I think it was dumb, but I mean, who are we? I mean, they never even commented on it. They were just like, they literally dug their heads in the sands. They were like, it's here to stay. So they probably signed like a 20-year deal on it. So they were like, oh well, it'll blow over eventually.
Yeah, I'm not gonna tell them that. Are you gonna tell them that? I don't want to tell them that it's 20 years.
It was they probably went into DEFCON 400 when they saw their team went on a massive losing streak.
Yeah.
Right after putting the patch on the jersey. So, and that was right after a huge winning streak too.
That
right
too,
after they were doing so good.
It was like the worst timing and, like, the worst kind on, like, the worst or the most beautiful jersey. Like, like you were saying, none of it seemed to have made sense to make that decision.
While superstition might not be real, momentum definitely is. And that took the wind right out of their sails and is ultimately the reason why they missed the playoffs, and Detroit needs the playoffs. The Red Wings need the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you if they're on the right path or not. Steve Yzerman is very ambiguous with everything he says. You never really know what the pace is for the rebuild because you're making great strides, but then he's keeping his cards close to his chest and he's saying, like, I don't expect to make the playoffs, but if we do, that's cool. I kind of think this year it's kind of unacceptable. We're reaching years and years down the line of this rebuild.
This one coming to year 7, I believe.
Yeah, they need to make the playoffs this year. Nothing short of the playoffs will, after this year, if they miss the playoffs, it's like people are going to be ticked off.
Yeah.
Next year, like the following year, you have to make the playoffs. You have to do whatever you can. But I will say, I don't know if you heard about yesterday. I don't know if you saw my post. if you see my meltdowns, I'm like I go into hibernation until the Red Wings do something. But they traded Jake Walman, right, to San Jose for nothing, and they had to give San Jose a second-round pick to take him, a cap dump, right?
Yeah.
That is the worst trade I've ever seen. Well, there's definitely worse trades,
right? But
it's the worst one Yzerman's ever made by far. And even if there's a lot of people who believe it's a cap dump, right? But you didn't need to dump his cap because he was on a decent contract and he was a solid defenseman. So unless he was like injured to the point where he was never going to play again or going to miss a couple seasons, like something majorly wrong, which very well could be, it doesn't make any sense to me. So because it reminds me of what we did to offload Pavel Datsuk's contract to Arizona, right? We didn't want to pay the cap hit while he wasn't playing for us anymore, so it very well could be something like that where Walman's injured, and we just don't know that because we're not on the inside.
Yeah, and especially Yzerman keeping it very close to the vest and that kind of stuff.
And maybe it's personal, like Walman, but I mean, as early as I think last month, he was talking about how much he's looking forward to helping the city of Detroit and building his charities up and how committed he was to being in Detroit. So he was blindsided by this too, is my best guess. But what I don't understand is that he was traded for that second round pick as a cap dump for future consideration. So for nothing.
Yeah.
For a box of dog treats. So other GMs have said they have no idea why he did that because they would have taken him, and they probably would have given more than future considerations. Other GMs are saying like, oh, I didn't even know he was shopping him. I would have absolutely taken him. So because I've seen reports that say that, it makes me lean further towards the fact that something came up where he's injured and unable to play.
And like, we got to get him out.
But regardless of if Yzerman goes out and does something, because free agency starts on Monday. Mm-hmm. So if free agency starts and he goes out and makes a big pick, if Walman's not injured or anything, he's fine and he's going to play on the San Jose Sharks next year. Regardless of if we go get a star caliber defenseman, forward, whatever, we're straight of his tenure. Not even close. I mean, if Walman really is fine, and you have other GMs saying they would have listened at least. Future considerations for a league average, at least, I'd say a little above average, but by statistics, a league average defenseman playing top minutes who scored massive goals for you is a fan favorite. The fan favorite one doesn't matter so much because hockey's a business.
Sure.
But a fan favorite, this player that has a great energy about him, is playing with Moritz Seider, a future star of the NHL.
Yeah.
A left defenseman, which is, a really good left defenseman, is great for a team, which the Red Wings don't have a ton of right now. They might have a pretty good prospect pool, but not so much on the team ready right now. So I think that it is bizarre for them to have made that move, knowing what we know now. In a couple hours, a couple days, a couple weeks, we could be like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah,
but
because you were checking your phone even before we started recording just to make sure like we didn't miss anything and we're totally out of date. Like, because this stuff happens like quickly.
And a couple things go through my mind. I'm very media brained now.
Of course.
So a couple things went through my brain as soon as I saw it. First of all, I was like, man, I really like Jake Walman. That is sad.
Yeah.
that sucks.
Just for you as a fan.
He's a fan favorite. The second thing is, what's Steve up to? Like, he's got to be up to something. But then you dig into the contract, into the trade, and you're like, that sucked regardless.
Yeah.
But for him to move the other kind of avenue you can go down with this, which you speculate on everything, is he had something cooked already, right? And he needed to dump the cap because he's still got to sign Seider and Raymond, who are going to command quite a bit of coin.
For sure.
So they got, I think, $32 million in cap space, which is quite a bit. But it looks that high because their two best RFAs aren't signed yet.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that doesn't go on long, and God forbid, hopefully it doesn't go to arbitration.
Yeah. I mean, you want to lock them up.
Yeah. Lock them up, long-term deals, both Raymond and Seider. You got to do it, and that's probably half of your salary cap right there. $32 million, half of that's eaten up. Mm-hmm. So you don't quite have as much, but you still have, $16 million to throw around.
Yeah, it's enough to play with, right?
So the other avenue that I found my brain going down is maybe Steve has already talked to a free agent and has them committed to signing with him by their word, because they can't officially do it until July 1st.
Right.
So I'm thinking that one of these free agents that he's reportedly in on has interest and is probably going to sign with him, whether that's Gensel as a forward, maybe Marty Necas as a forward as well, not quite as good as Gensel, both from the Hurricanes though, or maybe a Chikrin, or a big-bodied defenseman that we really want, we want a sandpaper defenseman. It's really what the Wings have missed, and probably the biggest gap they had last year. I mean, when you have Jeff Petrie playing on the team as a defenseman, he definitely gives you room to want more, but. And Jeff Petrie is great, back in the day, in his Canadiens day. I remember he was a thorn in our side, but he's probably an AHL defenseman right now. If he's playing professional hockey, he's probably an AHL defenseman. So fielding him on the ice is brutal. So you probably want a grit sandpaper defenseman, so maybe they're on that, but also goalie. So they could be looking at John Gibson. They could be looking at a couple different options in net. So he could really do anything with it. The defense is what is really hurting right now that you made that trade, because Wallman was a top 4 defenseman. I mean, you traded one of your top 4 defensemen, and now you have a considerable gap. It was probably an odd man out. I see a couple of opinions saying that he was probably just the odd man out because they had signed a couple defensemen to league contracts where you're probably going to have Edvinsson playing on the team. He's huge. Maybe they're hoping he can become that sandpaper grit defenseman because he's huge and he can really throw people around and bully people.
Yeah.
So he's great. So maybe he can. I see they brought in Johansson. They signed him to his league contract, so maybe it has something to do with him. But at the end of the day, the trade kind of sucks regardless of what he does with it. I keep coming back to that.
Because you think, even with a greater plan in mind, that one step, he could have had a better first step.
Well, he usually
thought, right?
Steve Yzerman is usually, playing, 4-dimension chess while we're playing Uno. So he's usually, I have to believe he's got something cooked up, but he's said it himself. I mean, he's done stupid things, and this could genuinely just be a stupid thing. Maybe he was playing franchise mode on EA Sports NHL, and he pressed the wrong button and accidentally traded a defenseman to a team.
That's a real player.
I've done that before on be a GM in NHL.
You've traded away real people.
Yeah, but
you traded away coworkers.
But at the end of the day, you just never know what he's going to do, and it could develop into a huge move. I mean, they could make a huge trade with the salary cap they have. They could if they sign Jake Gensel, I mean, they're adding a crazy good top 6 forward who he probably slots onto the first line. You field a line of Larkin, DeBrincat, and Gensel, they're probably the best line in the National Hockey League, honestly. So, besides McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman, I mean,
McDavid and anybody.
Yeah, you could pick 2 fans out of the audience and put them on the wings with McDavid, and they'd still both put up 50 points. There, I followed the Penguins for a really long time because their history is so rich.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what they did with Mario Lemieux. I mean, Mario Lemieux got paid so much, but they'd find these random dudes and put them on his wing, and then all of a sudden his wingers are scoring 80, 90 points a season, and then you take them off their line and they score like 4 points a season.
Yeah, like nothing even close.
It's a good way to boost their value, though. You're like, look, this guy's scoring 90 points a season. You want to trade your second? Give me 2 seconds and a first for him. You trade him away, and he scores 4 points for you. You're like, this guy sucks.
How does he suck?
Yeah, that's the star effect. I mean, McDavid is the best player on the planet, so that goes without saying.
Yeah, that one's a non-negotiable from a non-hockey person. Just kind of hearing his name in the finals, that's non-negotiable. Absolutely.
A couple of years ago, it was there was a couple names in the hat. It's all McDavid now. I mean, especially if he would have won the Stanley Cup this year. I mean, even though he didn't, he's still best player on the planet.
Of course.
But I mean, the question then becomes, though, who would you rather have? Because he makes so much money. I think the Oilers, going back to their situation, they lost the Stanley Cup. And you might be thinking, oh, no big deal. They could just be back at the same situation, back at it next year.
Yeah, and that's always a thought when you see a team lose and so far in the playoffs. Oh, they'll be back. They'll be back because they were good enough to do it this year. You got no idea what's going to change in that next season.
And for the Oilers, it might be a lot. They got a lot of UFAs. They got a lot of restricted free agents. This team could look wildly different. And what is so different, and when you go to the Stanley Cup final, more so when you win the cup, but when you go all the way to the final, you got guys in there, if their contracts are up, which the majority of their team, like the majority of the, not a couple guys, the majority of the Oilers, their contracts are getting ready to be up. The Panthers too. Panthers are going to be in the same boat. I won't be surprised if one of these two teams miss the playoffs next year.
Really? It could go that far down in one season.
I mean, you look at Reinhart, scored the Stanley Cup winning goal.
Mm-hmm.
UFA. He's gone. There's no chance a Stanley Cup winner is not... I mean, he could take a discount. In a perfect world with sunshines and rainbows, he takes a discount, he stays with the Panthers.
And he's good with his buddies. You guys can be together.
No way they can retain him. He's going to attract top dollar from a team, probably Vegas. Watch it actually be Vegas. I mean, they just get everyone now, but they're going to demand a lot of money. So the Oilers on their side of it too, they have so many people that they need to sign. They're kind of in this situation. The Panthers are different because they just won the cup. They probably don't care. Everyone wants to repeat, but it's like, all right, they just won the cup.
You're good for a little bit.
So they don't have McDavid and Draisaitl. They just beat McDavid and Draisaitl, but McDavid and Draisaitl eat up so much of their cap. So the Oilers are always going to be in this cycle as long as they have McDavid and Draisaitl. It's kind of like the NBA when you look at it from this perspective.
Sure.
Where they're two huge stars. They're a super team.
Yeah.
But they assemble a skeleton team around it. This year they were able to bring in some people after the trade deadline and really help their team. They got some decent goaltending from Skinner, but the issue for the Oilers, especially when they go on these losing streaks during the season, was goaltending and defense, right? They've got some, Darnell Nurse played really solid for them. They got some decent goaltending down the stretch from Stuart Skinner, especially in those 3 wins in the finals. But the issue really starts to become you can't really assemble a deep enough team around those two guys.
Just because of how, you don't have the money left to do that.
Something is always going to be lacking. They made it to the finals this year, but the issue with making it to the finals is those UFAs and those RFAs are going to demand more money because of how far you got and how big of a role they may have played or may not have played.
Right.
And other teams also see that they made it to the cup final and what they did or didn't do. So they're going to attract competition between teams to retain players.
Yeah.
So it's going to look wildly different. But the Oilers have to walk on eggshells because they can't just bring in anybody because their cap is eaten up by 2 players.
Right.
So, again, a very simple way to look at it. There's more moving pieces to it, but the bottom line is making it to the Cup final this year, this might have been one of their only shots because, when you have the best player on the planet, you might always have a shot, but at the end of the day, it takes so much of a team. I'd argue that your third line is probably your most important line in the playoffs. Your top guys are going against their top guys. You're canceling out the majority of the time.
Right.
The McDavid factor exists, but he was held without a point in Game 6, Game 7.
Like it's possible to deal with one person.
Right. You shut them down, and people joke, but it's serious. Edmonton's game plan was pretty much give it to McDavid. They got incredibly lucky when they were clawing back not lucky, but fortunate when they clawed back in the series. They got a lot of depth scoring, which is something that comes and goes for Edmonton. When they don't have the depth scoring, you'll notice it's really hard for them to win. If they don't have the depth scoring and one of the two, McDavid or Draisaitl, aren't putting up points, they're going on these really cold streaks. So Edmonton's in a very, very precarious situation where I am interested to see how their offseason is going to go. I'm interested to see what they're going to do with Draisaitl because you almost start to wonder if they got to trade Draisaitl. I was wondering if they were going to trade Draisaitl during the season when they were bottom of the league to start the season.
Yeah, because at the time, I'm sure that they looked like sellers.
Yeah, I thought they were going to bust apart the team. I thought McDavid was going to start getting antsy and start lopping off heads, but they came back and, man, they proved a lot of people wrong. But
it's gonna be tough
getting back. A lot of times, like Florida lost in the Cup final last year, came back, won it this year. I don't see Edmonton doing that. Too much is shit. That Florida team got better. I don't see Edmonton getting better. They're in such a tight spot that I don't see them getting better. But the Red Wings, though, do I see them getting better? Yes. So, look, it's easy to get ahead of ourselves and say, they're not in the playoffs. I'm ticked off,
Right.
And I am. I'm starting to get antsy. This year matters a lot. Last year mattered a lot, but they showed great improvement. The last game of the season mattered.
Yeah.
Until it didn't. By the time we were in the shootout, it didn't matter anymore. And we still won.
Yeah, but only by a matter of minutes,
Yeah, until like the last 30 seconds of television time for the Red Wings, it mattered. That's a huge step. But this year, and especially next year, it's not enough to just matter. You got to be in the playoffs.
You got to get it.
You got to go and get it because people are going to be, I'm starting to get impatient as it is. We got a garbage patch on our jersey. I want to see results. And results so far we've gotten better every year. Now we got to make the playoffs. We got to.
Yeah, but is progression like that, can a linear progression like that maintain for a while? Is there going to be any kind of flexion in that kind of upward trend for the Red Wings? At some point.
So I say all the time, there's a really good chance we have expectations sitting here that they should make the playoffs this year. We've already seen some move with the Wallman move. I'm like, oh man, that team's it got worse. It got worse with that trade. It definitely did.
Right now we did.
In the future, maybe there's a move coming again. But the thing that people don't tend to realize, so we have one of the best prospect groups in the league, probably the first or second best prospect pool in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't always pan out. Your prospects, you're going to have some prospects that are great, some that aren't. The fact of the matter is, when you bring these young guys up, even if they're ready, when they're playing their first little bit in the NHL, there is such a learning curve.
Oh, I'm
so
sure.
As the team gets younger, and which it has to do, you got, people who you want the competition in the team, and you want these good players. But if you're bringing in these young guys all at once, and they're all taking jobs from NHLers, they're going to find out the hard way. The league is way different. So if you get younger, you bring in the guys from Grand Rapids, you bring the guys all over from overseas, you can't do it all at once. So it does have to be a slow roll. And you have to have this steady progression, and that's what keeps you relevant.
Yeah.
That is what has kept Tampa so good for so long. They're starting to hit that edge now where they haven't had those picks. Because eventually you get to a point where you don't need your draft picks. You're selling it at the trade deadlines to bring in people to help you win the cup.
Yeah.
We haven't been in that position for a very long time, so we have a lot of good, solid prospects. None of them are the best. Like
they're not going to take over the world.
None of them are franchise caliber. That's just factual, unfortunately. We have some really good prospects that if they pan out, they're going to be to the level of where they'll help a team. The Red Wings, when they win a cup, they don't have McDavid, they don't have Crosby, they don't have Ovechkin. For a while, we were blessed with a lot of talent. The Russian Five, right? The next time the Wings win a cup, it's going to be because the team is just overall solid. It makes me think of the St. Louis Blues in 19. They didn't have one, besides Jordan Binnington, their goalie, they didn't have one player who was head and shoulders above the rest. They're just a good, solid team, a gutsy team that plays really well. Next time the Wings win the cup, I expect it to be like that. I don't expect a franchise player. Dylan Larkin is amazing, don't get me wrong. He's a first-line center on a really, really perfect, great world. He's a second-line center, and you bring in a really, like, elite center. He fringes on that. Obviously, it was very evident this year that he's probably elite, but in a perfect world, maybe you don't even have a first or second line. You just have like a 1A and a 1B,
right,
where those two lines alternate, and you can really, if your top six is great, which the Wings even this year are going to have a great top six, but you just never know.
Right.
And with these prospects, to get back to your point, if you bring these prospects in, even one or two prospects, they're going to take up one or two roster spots. They're going to lead to a little fluctuation. So that is one way this year could go, is you could see a lot of fluctuation in their play, a lot of inconsistency in their play, just like more to the degree than last year as they add in.
Yeah.
So we want it to get better,
of course,
but also there's the other avenue. Again, there's so many different ways it can go. I mean, July 1st is on Monday, so this could all be irrelevant on Tuesday.
Unfortunately.
If Steve goes out, he has said numerous times, if there's a hockey move out there that makes sense and makes the team better, and the most important thing is that it makes sense for him. He's not a fan of long contracts, and he's not a expensive contracts. Some of them, I look at the Cop deal, the Perron deal. I look at some of them. We overpay sometimes, but it's not that big of a deal because A, we have the cap space when you're terrible,
right,
and B, because they're not long-term contracts. So Andrew Kopp probably needs to be bought out. He just has not been as advertised for the Wings, but he's scored some important goals. It's not the end of the world if he's on the team.
Sure.
But as Yzerman always says, it needs to make sense, and it needs to fit, and it needs to be the budget. He hates long-term contracts, and he doesn't want to overpay someone, especially not overpay for term. And I get that because that's why the Red Wings are bad.
Right, because they were stuck with so many of those for so long.
I mean, that Franz Nielsen contract is all-time one of the worst contracts in the NHL, and that's not an exaggeration. Like, you can look at top 10 lists of worst contracts. You're probably going to see the Franz Nielsen contract on there. You're probably going to see the Justin Abdelkader contract on there. I mean, it was bad hockey business, and it's what happens when you reward loyalty.
A little, yeah. And some's good, but you got to make sure you got to be smart about it.
But you got to question, though. I mean, with this move with Wallman, how committed he was to Detroit. How much it's hard to find people who love Detroit. By the way, he loved Detroit, and shipped him off for nothing. So obviously, hopefully, there's more to the story, but that kind of shows where Yzerman is on loyalty. So it's a tough draw. It is a business, but at the end of the day, we can sit and we can have our minds think about what Yzerman's doing.
Yeah.
He's the only one who truly knows. Maybe he just made a bad move, as he said he can do.
Yeah, and he goes, oops.
Maybe Monday comes and he brings in Jake Gensel, and we're like, it makes it a little better, because that's probably one of the best free agents that there is this year. So maybe he brings in Draisaitl, German, come play with Moritz Seider, also a German, there are so many options, on the table. It really does open this huge, dimension that he can play with.
Yeah, because you like, so it seems like the general consensus is that one move is not the sum in total. There's going to be more.
It can't be.
That's all of our conversation.
I mean, if in a couple weeks we're sitting here and nothing's happened still, I'll quadruple down on my statement that it's the worst trade that he's ever made. It could be upgraded to one of the worst trades genuinely of all time. I mean, and that's how confident though I am that there's a move following it. I think everyone agrees there's going to be another move because
you can't leave on that bad note, right?
Exactly. I mean, it doesn't. Going back to it, you just don't see any GM in history dump a manageable contract for nothing. It's not like this was a contract where we're like, please, San Jose, we know you're terrible. Take on this contract because we can't pay for it. We'll even retain some of it. It was a league average player at a manageable, good hit. Like, it didn't matter. It's a contract that every single team in the National Hockey League would take. So
we're going to have to see.
Yeah, it's tough.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait and see.
Again, so the other, the Sharks are very not good. You got general managers going to them with the recent situation with Barclay Goodrow. GM goes to him and he's like, can you do me a favor and claim him off of waivers because we want to dump his salary, essentially, right? We want to get rid of him, and he used to play for the Sharks. Mm-hmm. Barclay Goodrow had the San Jose Sharks on his no-trade list clause.
Oh, my.
So they got around that by dumping him on waivers, and the Sharks picked him up off waivers. So they had an agreement to do that. You have to assume. So maybe it's a similar circumstance where I've got to think that there's something going on even more than just we're going to add someone, but something was with Wallman. You see all the time with the Lions, right? Or in football in general.
Yeah.
But the Lions culture that we have, I forget who it was, but was it Bugs?
Isaiah Bugs, yeah.
Got rid of him, and then immediately turns out there was off-field stuff.
Plenty of it.
So it could be something like that. I doubt it because Jake Wallman is just genuinely such a good person.
Yeah.
So
you hope so, at least.
Well, I've spoken to him like twice. Genuinely just a good person. Almost every Red Wing I've ever talked to, great people. But like, I don't think that it would be anything like that. If anything, I think that it would lean closer to injury. And maybe Steve was like, hey, this guy's going to be out of commission for a year because maybe he's getting surgery and that's going to come out. Gets surgery, he's done for the year. And the Sharks take him on. Maybe they, buy out his contract or something. And we just washed our hands from it. That's the only way that trade isn't a total fart.
Like on its own. That's the only way.
On its own.
Yeah.
The only way that it's not a total fart. Even if we go out and we get a stunning player, stunning defense, Chikrin, we go out and get Gensel, Natchez, whoever. It's still an awful trade. Yeah. We have other GMs who are like, man, we probably would have just traded you we would have made a hockey trade with you.
Right.
So it definitely is just the start of the page. So you're going to see more. You got to see more.
You sure hope so.
But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you don't really know if the Wings are going to make the playoffs. You don't know if they're going to even be better, if they're going to be worse. The whole league is going to be closer next year. A lot of teams took a step back. But you got to look at who the Red Wings are up against in this rebuild. The Senators are adding to get better, right? The Panthers are at the top of the league. The Lightning are starting to kind of falter. Maybe we bring in Stamkos. I think he's a UFA right now, and he hasn't had any talks with the Lightning. I heard that talks were not going well with the Lightning. I just had the gears in my brain. Steve Yzerman guy, Lightning,
yeah. Okay. Maybe there's an existing connection there.
He's kind of on the older side though, so they wouldn't be the full side of the deal.
Sure,
like full side of everything. But I could definitely see Stamkos. Not a lot of people are talking about him because, in general, Stamkos has kind of been quiet over this. So
Perhaps we break the news here on the GioMoShow.
Yeah, yeah.
Perhaps we are the first to strike.
Keep your phone near you on July 1st.
Yeah.
That could make sense. But I think that there's a lot of teams. The Devils are no doubt going to be better. So if you're fighting for a wild card, you got the Devils and Sens, Flyers that are right there, right? Obviously, you got your juggernauts in the Atlantic. The Panthers, despite their issues and signing people, retaining whoever, they're still probably going to be up there.
Yeah.
So you got the Panthers, you got the Lightning. If they're up there, if they don't take a step back, they still have Nikita Kucherov and Andrei Vasilevsky, who's probably the best goalie in hockey. So they're probably going to be up there, right? You don't know if the Penguins are going to be good. They're desperately clinging on to life the same way the Red Wings were.
Yeah.
Man, their rebuild, the Penguins rebuild, going to be what the Red Wings are going through. It's going to be worse. It's going to be worse. They got probably, it's the consensus, probably the worst prospect pool in the league.
Oh, no.
If not one of the. They have a team that's just not meshing. On paper, the Penguins should have been cup contenders last year. They brought in Erik Karlsson. They still had Chris Letang, Malkin, Crosby, Gensel, Rust, Pontiac kid, Rust, by the way.
Hey.
Right from here in Pontiac. But team should have been a shoo-in. They were awful. I mean, watching the Penguins, I've never seen a team blow so many multi-goal leads in the third period alone. Like, it made watching the Red Wings during their losing streak look like watching, Miracle on Ice.
Yeah.
It was brutal. And they faltered. So who knows what they're going to be? They're not going to be able to change much. They're handcuffed. They're up against the cap.
Yeah.
They have a lot of aging people on really long contracts. You don't know what the Penguins are going to do. They sold Gensel, and then they immediately went on a run and almost made the playoffs. They were in that fight. But you don't know what's going to happen with the Pens. They're kind of a wild card. Capitals the same way, but I'm kind of leaning towards the Caps are going to be bottom of the Metro at least. And then the whole rest of the Atlantic. I mean, the Maple Leafs are so good. You got Columbus, which is kind of a wild card. They're probably not going to be all that. But the rest of that, the whole East, excluding the CBJ and excluding Washington, gloves off. I mean, all fighting for those little gains. I couldn't tell you who's going to, win the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
I couldn't even tell you. I mean, the Panthers could miss the playoffs, like I said. You never know. A lot of teams have that cup hangover, where they miss the playoffs the year after. So there's so many things that change in hockey. Again, a reason why it's so exciting, you don't know. The Red Wings, this year with what they had, they contended until the last second. You've got to believe, even if they bring in some prospects, they're going to be good. They're going to be solid. Their top six is intact. No one knows what's going to happen with Patrick Kane. I'd like to think he's open to coming back. If Chicago shuts the door on him, I think he comes back.
Yeah.
Because if he wants to play for a cup contender, I mean, I understand that, but you never know. The Wings, if they bring in a good free agent, they could be cup contenders.
Like you just never kind of know what
know.
the right piece is going to be to just rocking you back up.
You bring in, maybe Yzerman doesn't bring in just one free agent. Maybe there's more moves to come, and you just change up the team wildly, and we're probably, a grit, big good defenseman. An offensive defenseman, a really good offensive defenseman. Gostisbehere is good, but like a really, really good offensive defenseman, a good defensive defenseman, and a goalie away from being a solid team. Because the issues we had down the stretch, if we couldn't put the puck in the net, we couldn't keep the puck out of the net.
Right.
If we could, put the puck in the net, then we would win. But as soon as we stopped scoring, we'd lose 7-0.
Yes, it's like you're trying to plug 3 holes with
100%.
3 holes with 2 plugs.
Yes, there was such an uphill battle because they'd go on these streaks with the caliber of players they had.
Yeah,
they should, they had a really good offense and a really good power play, which is something that for years has been killing us. Awesome power play. When we got a power play this year, it was like, we could score.
Yeah.
So in years past, I mean, it was the bottom of the league. I mean, the worst power play, and you'd watch it and you'd bang your head against cement brick. But this year it was solid, and we had the good players to put on the power play. It really made the difference. The talent level brought the power play up. But down the stretch, what really started killing us was the inconsistency in goal. And really, you can't put it all on them, because lumped in that is defense.
Right.
Team defense, too. A lot of people are just saying, like, the defense as a whole was terrible. It wasn't quite just that, right? It was more so that you saw a total destruction of the team in their own zone. People didn't know who to cover, didn't know who to go. They were steps, not just one step, 2 or 3 steps too slow, covering guys. And you got scored. And horrible with their own possession in their own zone. I mean, the Red Wings, there's probably not a stat that tracks this, but they probably led the league in errors not forced.
Like unforced errors, and especially like
right
close to the net when it matters. Like, you need to get control of this thing.
So, breakouts are a huge deal, right? Too many times they make an error on an easy pass. I mean, you're passing to a guy who's 4 feet in front of you, and you mess up the pass and you go get scored on because you did that. And they did that so often. God forbid they have pressure on them for a breakout. So many times they got crushed in their own zone and then get scored on because they turn it over because they just don't make the smart play. And obviously it's easy looking at the screen and being like, you didn't make the smart play.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, come on, you get paid millions of dollars to make the smart
and if
play.
it happens over and over and over again, you got to learn from this, man.
Right. And it did all the way through the season. A lot of times it didn't matter because we were scoring so many goals that it didn't matter.
Yeah.
But then as soon as that goal scoring dried up, it was so evident that we couldn't get the goaltending. We couldn't get the big saves when it needed. And it's not like, you need a goaltender to bail you out, right? You just need, it got to the point where you just need a goaltender to make a save on a shot from behind the net.
Yeah.
And it was, they were going in, it was so many times. James Reimer, when he was in net, he'd make these incredible acrobatic saves. And then some flubber from the blue line unscreened would go in on him. And you'd be like, how do you not make that save? And then Ken Daniels, Mickey Redmond would be like, oh, that's one he'd like to have back. It could have been his catchphrase that year for Reimer. So, and then Ville Husso was down with injury. You don't know what's going to happen with him this year. And really, those 2 holes alone open it up to make me believe there's got to be a goaltender added. I mean, I think most people believe we're probably going to get a goalie. We're not going to carry 3 goalies again this year.
Right.
And you just want to get a star goalie. You don't know where one's going to open up. But
hard to find.
It might be John Gibson. I don't agree with overpaying for Gibson. I think he's good, but I mean, he's no better than what you had this year. So it's tough to say. Again, I hope they improve. I hope that next week I text you and they've made an insane trade for someone that made us a playoff contender. But I mean, who knows? It comes down to so many different things.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to get that text. And now you got me primed, and I feel like I've went to the library and watched the past every game of the season. You have a fantastic catalog of all what's happened. You teaching me about the Red Wings, what we're looking for, why the NHL has been great. And Ben, that's why I got you on the show, baby. Thank you so much.
You now have all of the world's knowledge of hockey. You could probably go play hockey right now.
I feel like I can lace them up.
I think you probably could. Let's get this guy signed to an 8x8 contract and get him playing for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Can't wait. Well, anyway, that'll close us out here for the JoMo Show. Ben Schroeder here, former sports director here. We had a chat all about our past years at WXOU, building WXOU Sports, and you setting the stage for me as to what's going to be going on. NHL draft coming up, what teams are looking like, how the Oilers could maybe not make the playoffs, or the Panthers as well. Man, it's been a fantastic ride through the world of hockey. So, Ben, thank you so much.
Yep. Now the world's a little brighter knowing what you know.
That's for
Thanks
sure.
for having me on. I appreciate it, man.
Of course, it's been a lot of fun. And if you want to tune into the JoMo Show, you want your Oakland sports updates, you want your USPBL updates, you want interviews with more like Ben and athletes from Oakland University, the JoMo Show right here on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast is going to be your home for that. So, from Giovanni Moshe, from Ben Schroeder, thank you for tuning into the JoMo Show, and we'll see you soon.